Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Alan Baker Show. I'm Alan Baker, and we're going to cover some pretty interesting topics today. I had a conversation with a student while I was traveling for the last 30 days. I just cut back from my normal October travel schedule. In October, I do a lot of training for the Executive Protection Institute. And generally, after that, I am working with Jason Redman at his Overcome and Survive event. So I'm on the road for anywhere from 20 to 30 days, working with different individuals, different students. And this one student was at EPI, and he had some questions in regards to what I normally call long range posturing. And I thought I would cover that information in this podcast. One of the things that I noticed when putting together the program for EPI and actually several other groups that I'm working with is, with even with my background in the martial arts, not a lot of those systems answer certain questions that, especially these days in the direction society is going in, there's more needed information. And one of those things is what I refer to as long range posturing. So, what do I mean by that? Really, it's going to be, you could also say it is your daily posturing habits. And one of the things I reference quite often when I'm discussing this is, the fact that a predatory mindset that is looking for a victim will generally have some sort of surveillance that precedes that violent event or encounter. Now, of course, there are times that are just random acts of violence, and we are seeing more of those these days. But we're talking about an individual who is taking the time to look for a victim. He knows that what he's out and what he's looking to do, and he wants to find an easy meal and someone that is going to easily fit into that victim category. A lot of times when I discuss this subject, one of the things I like to talk about is a study that was done, if I'm not mistaken, about 10 years ago, and it's called the Grayson Stein Study. And you can look this up on the internet pretty easily. Anyway, in this study, what they did is they set up a camera on a sidewalk, and I believe they did it as well in a busy hallway at a business. And they just recorded everyday people walking by on this video. And then they took that video to the local prison and they put it in front of felons, individuals that were guilty of rape, of murder, predators. And one of the things they said when they put it in front of them, they said, "Show me the individuals that you would victimize." And in the study, they pointed out that these guys that they put this in front of would pick out these individuals on average, in 5 seconds. So they play this video, and here's this guy sitting there, and he's pointing at individuals on the screen. He goes, "That guy, I'd get that guy." People are walking by, and then there's one, I'd get him. More people walk by on the video, they pick out the next one. And so they took the same video into the next room, into the next cell, and they asked the next felon the same thing. And what they found after doing this for a series with different individuals is these guys were picking out the same individuals. And they were doing this in like 5 seconds without talking to each other. So then they took this information and said, "We're going to put a study together for it," which thank goodness they did. It produced some fantastic information. And they took it back and to talk to these individuals, and they asked them why. Why did you pick that person? Why did you pick this person? And they came up with a series of things that they refer to as habits that attract assault. And it's a very interesting list. But if you think about this, who teaches us those posturing habits that we do every day. Have you ever had someone have a conversation with you about, hey man, you ever thought about how you walk down the street, how you hold yourself, your level of observation? And what we're going to go through this list here in a minute and discuss some of these things. But I just wanted to reference that study because this is the same study and base of information that I use when I teach the PRT program at EPI. And I also reference it quite often at Redmond's Overcome and Survive events. And so it's fantastic information. And there's really two sides to posturing for me. And one is the one we just pointed out. What the predatorial mind sees when they are stalking, they're looking for a victim. But it also works in reverse. We can use it to recognize like pre-attack indicators. Things that I can notice that the predator is doing while surveilling or stalking me potentially or someone that I am in charge of protecting. And so there's some interesting information there that we're going to touch on as well. But it pretty much comes down to, for me, understanding your vulnerability factors. What makes you vulnerable? And I wanted to touch on that first before going through some of that information. And for me, there's a basic list of information of vulnerability. I usually will refer to these as the pillars of vulnerability. And I do a lot of work in the bodyguard industry, both teaching and working in the industry. And different individuals, high net worth individuals, will hire bodyguards to work this out for them. They'll go through a threat assessment and they'll take a look at their life, how they live, where they go, what do they drive, what kind of individuals are around them. And they'll use this threat assessment to design a protection program for them. Well, you don't necessarily have to hire a protection agent to do this. You can do this for yourself. And this is something that I teach quite often as civilians, especially in today's world with where things are going. It's important to have the skill even more. Maybe I can't afford to hire that bodyguard, but it doesn't mean I can't educate myself, learn this information, and then apply it in my own life in order to make myself safer, keep my family safer. So, understanding your vulnerability factors or the pillars of vulnerability. So, one of the first ones is your predictability. What does that mean? Like we said earlier, in general, now not every case is this way, but the predator will surveil their victims first in some form. It could be extended surveillance because they're specifically trying to target an individual, or it might just be brief. They're just like these guys watching people walk by on that sidewalk. How predictable are you? And I was actually having a conversation with a client yesterday about this. Predictability in how do you interact every day with your environment? Do you drive to work with the same route every day? Do you park in the same parking spot every day when you get to work? And if you think about it, if you think like the bad guy and put him out there and he is watching you, what is he seeing? Oh, here they are. They're going on the same route they did yesterday and the day before. And I'm going to follow them in the parking lot at work and let's see where they park. How about that? They parked in the same spot. So as the bad guy, what does that tell me? In order to get in range of you, inside of critical distance or closer to you, I could just park a car in the spot next to the one you park in every day, lay the seat down and lay there and wait for you to come in and pull into the parking spot you use every day. And this is just one example. If we sit back and we think like the bad guy, and this is something a tool that they use to teach at EPI on a regular basis. It's one of the first principles that they introduce is think like the bad guy. What am I seeing? And how predictable does it make you? If you have a high level of predictability, it makes you easier to get access to. So that's one of the first pillars of vulnerability to think about is how predictable you are. And there's many different areas that you can apply this principle to. I'm just giving one example to make you aware of it. So the next thing is accessibility. How accessible are you? And when thinking like the bad guy in the parking lot a little bit earlier, we figured out that if I get there early, I'll park in that parking spot right next to where you always go. It puts me within 10 feet of you when you get out of the car. You are more accessible to me. So, how do I change that? What can I do to lower my accessibility? Is it going to be in this example, parking in a different parking spot? Maybe choosing another location to park in. It could be something rather simple. The main point is taking the time to look at that pillar of vulnerability and question yourself, what you do on a daily basis, and see what little adjustments you can do to increase your safety. So the next pillar is lack of appropriate resources, which could be training. And there's a lot of different things that can be plugged into this as well. Resources could be a different locking system on your front door at home. Um, it could be weaponry that you have staged in your vehicle. When I teach the vehicle-centric defensive tactics program, this is a major topic that we discuss is weapons of opportunity. And how do I stage those weapons of opportunity inside the vehicle? And, it gives me an appropriate resource if. So, and this, just like the first two principles, can be applied in many different areas. So you want to look and say, do I have what I need for protection? Do I have an everyday carry that works for me, that I use or carry consistently, that I can use? It's available to me. And the fourth pillar is poor planning or poor preparation. And this is something that I've been speaking to a lot in the last 5 years, is just getting more prepared. You know, to say it again, the world is going in a direction that isn't necessarily positive. So it's not a bad idea to spend some time becoming more prepared just in case. Spend some time thinking and processing what we're talking about here in order to make yourself safer, to create habits of non vulnerability. So, part of that is planning, taking the time to sit down and doing what we're just talking about right now, taking a look at your daily habits. What can I adjust? And then also getting access to training. And there, what I'm talking about, the type of training might be disaster preparedness training. If it is a flood or a hurricane, and this can vary depending on your area. And there's many different things that could happen. Are you prepared for it? Do you have enough stores at the house where you could have something to eat for a week if the power was off? You and your family. It's something to think about. Next would be, self protection. And I generally divide these up in different ways. And I look at self protection as the information that we're actually discussing right now. It's not necessarily self defense, but you've heard the term be your own bodyguard. That falls under self protection. What things can you do with your planning? What habits can you change on a daily basis that makes you exist safer and move through life at a level that is going to be a little more protected? Self-defense training, appropriate defensive tactics, empty hand training, martial arts. There's a lot of different options. We just want to make sure we're answering the appropriate questions as civilians when we go and plug in that information. Because the truth is, Although martial arts are a great source of information for learning to use your body as a tool for, or as a weapon, but a tool for violence, it doesn't necessarily answer the legal part of it or the social buildup that happens prior to an exchange. Sometimes it doesn't answer the question about the verbal exchange. And both of these things are arts unto themselves, and they're important because in our society, I can't just ball my fist up and go into a stance. And if I do it at the wrong time, now I'm charged with assault. So it's something to think about. And, obviously, marksmanship. Um, eh, Maybe you're comfortable with that, maybe you're not. If you are, getting appropriate training. A lot of people, they'll say, I need to buy a pistol, I need to get a gun, and they just buy the gun, but they don't train with it. It is imperative to train with it and imperative to do it on a consistent basis. Now, it doesn't mean go to the range every week. You might pick out an event twice a year and you say, I'm going to go to that event and get some trigger time, get more comfortable with this firearm so that if I ever have to use it, I'm going to be proficient with it. You have to understand the laws behind it. You want to look into appropriate self defense insurance in case you ever have to use that weapon. So those are some of the things that you could take into consideration when you're looking at, do I have the appropriate training and advanced planning in preparation? It seems like a lot, but there are organizations you can get involved with. There are people that you can contact that can help you organize the thought tools that are involved with getting this self education and get it done. So I could go on about this for quite a bit, but one of the main things I wanted to do is introduce it because of the individual that I had that conversation with had no clue. And this guy is entering into the protection industry, but he had never considered this information. Um, so it's super important, not only for the professional bodyguard, but also for us as civilians in preparation for potential chaos that we may run into in life. So earlier, we were discussing that Morrison Stein study, and they refer to this study as attracting assault and victims' nonverbal cues. In other words, your daily habits, your body language that you are speaking to the world. And, potentially the people you're speaking to are those predatorial minds. And, we discussed them making those videos and putting it in front of those predators and having them pick out the individuals and then later going back and saying, what was it you noticed? And so here are some of the things that came out of that list. Stride length, the length of your stride. Knees, whether they're locked straight or bent. It's a very interesting thing. And I teach something, I lecture about it quite often to professionals, and it is how to enter a more athletic state, a more predatorial state. What does that mean? If I have to get into a fight, you've probably heard the term flipping the switch. When I flip the switch in order to enter into that state where I have to have a physical exchange with somebody, or maybe I have to run, I have to athletically respond to something. What are some of the physical things that change in that state? And this is something that I teach quite often is you soften the knees, you bend them. You'll see animals do this when they start to prepare to stalk prey. So these predators are recognizing this in their victims, recognizing how bent the knees are, how athletic the person moves. So another one was tempo of the body. Is it a slow, sluggish tempo, or is it a crisp movement? Weight shift as they're walking. It's really interesting. And if you think about it, this all comes out of just someone who is a predatorial mind. Did someone teach them this? No. They learned this through wisdom, which means they learned it through a lifetime of application, of surveilling, and and stalking or picking someone that could be a potential victim. The type of energy you have, you could say your attitude, how you hold yourself, um, body movement, head movement. Um, I would connect this to optics. You hear this term quite often is becoming more aware, increasing your awareness. Well, if you think about it, the predator that is surveilling for a potential easy meal, he doesn't want someone that's highly aware, someone who is heads up, eyes up, and on a swivel. They're looking around, they're seeing what's happening in their environment. And if you take into consideration thought tools that are used to help you make decisions quicker, and I referenced the OODA loop, one of the first things that happens in the OODA loop is observation. And we talk about it, but it's important to ask yourself, what are your observation habits? Do you have them? And we try to ingrain habits into ourselves, like in a martial arts class, in order to throw a punch at an appropriate time. It takes practice, consistency. Same thing with your optical habits. How do you train them? What should they look like? What body shapes do you want to train into your nervous system to recognize while you are counter surveilling? And again, we could discuss this for another hour. But the main point I wanted to do is just kind of introduce the list, so it'll change your mindset, and you start to take it into consideration. And if the awareness of this type of thing just makes you change a mental habit of being more aware every day, then we've done a good thing. And like we said earlier, there's two sides to this. The surveillance side, or the predatorial surveillance side, and the counter to that. It works for us as well because we can recognize pre-attack indicators from predators. What will I recognize in them to realize that I am being surveilled or stalked? And just to run through a few things on that list to become aware of it, but target glancing. I think this one is going to be more of a close range idea, but in other words, when I speak or train with law enforcement officers, they recognize this in individuals that are getting ready to fight or getting ready to take off. Is their eyes will look in certain areas. Those areas are generally related to weaponry that they're carrying. Grooming gestures, nervousness, like they're building up for something, clenching of fist, shifting of weight. This is something that I teach quite often in what I call critical distance, is being able to read the human body and how it operates. And one of the key things we look at is shifting weight between feet. If you think about it, you have to do this to walk. You have to do it in order to even move forward in a threatening manner. So it is a key element that we want to be able to pick up visually. A fixed stare. They're fixated on you, and you recognize this. And this can lead from a long range pre-attack indicators into close range pre-attack indicators, even if the threat has moved into a social distance, meaning the distance where I would have a conversation. And the study of this range, this critical distance, is a huge and very important study in the social buildup prior to contact that leads to an exchange or a fight. So training those visual optics goes both ways. One, we know that the predatorial mind generally is going to be doing some sort of surveillance. What does that look like? What do they look for? And why are they looking for it? Generally because they want an easy meal. They don't want difficulty because they can just move on to the next one. And, we went through the list, and again, it's an extensive list, but if we pick like one habit, and if it were me, off the list that we looked at earlier, it would be head position. Because if you think about it, watch the average group of people walking down the street. How many heads are buried in cell phones, looking down, completely unaware of your environment, uh, and not paying any attention to what's going on. And if we are thinking like the bad guy as they surveil for a potential victim, that's an ideal situation for me. And then, if I have my optics online, if I am looking, what am I looking for? What are the cues that I want to be able to recognize from a potential threat? What does that look like at distance? What does it look like at close range? So, and again, you may just pick some of the major physical body positions. An example of this, we teach this in the PRT, we call it forming the V. And what we mean by that is anytime a predator would reach for the belt line, and it's a very common place to keep weaponry, the position of the arm is in a V shape. And, of course, yes, they could be pulling out a cell phone, they could be pulling out a pen to use it. It's just training the nervous system in order to recognize it. I don't necessarily have to react to it. I just want to recognize it because it is a common position that the human machine uses to reference weaponry on the belt line. All right, guys. So we talked a little bit about understanding the pillars of vulnerability. And then during that discussion, we referenced the Grayson Stein Study, and it primarily focused on what predators look for in their victims. But we also want to take into consideration the reverse of that. So I can be aware of pre-attack indicators that make me more aware when I'm training my optics and I'm keeping them online. And a pretty deep topic. And I remember when I first started designing programs for different professional groups, law enforcement agencies, we started to plug in this information and introduce it. And this was probably 15 years ago. And over that time, it has grown to the point where this study, could be a lecture. I lecture on this information quite often. And also when I'm teaching the programs for Baker Defensive Tactics, we touch on this subject more and more lately because it's just not readily available in different programs. So hopefully, as a civilian, this helps you be more prepared or start to develop the mindset of preparedness. And again, this is something that one of my goals is to help individuals be more prepared. I mean, the world, like I have said previously, isn't necessarily going in a good direction. I mean, you can turn on the news at any given night and see that. So what are you doing to prepare yourself for it? And it's a deep bucket of information to look into. You don't have to deep dive, but at least you can pick an area and start working on it just for your own self-protection or your family's self-protection. Guys, if I add any value to you with this episode, please do me a favor and like and subscribe so that you will get the updates when new episodes come out. And also, if you like the information, share it with a friend. It really helps us grow and expand and reach more people and do more good.